What's up everybody and welcome back to another video. This will be the second video in the Donkey Kong Marathon. The next game we'll be covering is Donkey Kong Country. This is the game that made me into a Donkey Kong fan and exposed me to the Big Ape for the first time. But what makes Donkey Kong Country one of the more memorable games for the Super Nintendo? Or one of the more memorable games for me in general? I'll tell you. So after Donkey Kong 3, or Donkey Kong Jr. Math if you want to acknowledge that game's existence, Donkey Kong pretty much disappeared from the face of gaming. Sure, he's made a few appearances here and there, and Donkey Kong Jr. became a playable driver in Super Mario Kart, but that was pretty much it. But I can understand why. DK's best days were relegated to arcade cabinets even if they would get ports to the NES. The Big Ape's adversary would later get his own spin-off game, Mario Bros. Afterwards, Mario became an established icon. Where did this leave Donkey Kong? Development of Donkey Kong Country started in the summer of 1993. Nintendo of America's Tony Harmon visited Rare Studios and was impressed by a tech demo of a boxer punching, and thus the beginning of the Nintendo-Rare collaboration. Originally known as Ultimate Play the Game, Rare was known for a lot of popular titles such as Jetpack, RC Pro-Am, and Battletoads. Nintendo was looking for a game to surpass the graphics of the Sega Genesis game Disney's Aladdin. While Aladdin was also on the Super Nintendo, it was clear that the Sega Genesis version looked so much better in its animation and quality. The animation for the Sega Genesis Aladdin has taken hand-drawn cells and converted them into sprites, the end result being a video game that looked like an animated feature film. Behind the brilliant minds of Rare were Tim and Chris Stamper, also known as the Stamper Brothers. Also at Rare was young designer Kevin Bayliss, who specialized in 3D character design. Bayliss at the time was pitching an idea for a 2D fighter with pre-rendered 3D graphics, originally titled Brute Force. Impressed by Rare's technology, who could blame them, Nintendo gave Rare creative freedom to develop a game to rival the graphical fidelity of Disney's Aladdin for the Sega Genesis. Nintendo and Tim both decided that it was time to bring Donkey Kong back from the dead. Bayliss was put in charge of redesigning Donkey Kong's character design, with the help of some sketches provided by Shigeru Miyamoto, the original creator of Donkey Kong. Bayliss looked back at his previous characters that he designed, the Battletoads, so he used the character models for that series for inspiration to redesign Donkey Kong and his new line of characters. You can tell from the eyebrows, the eyes, and the chest that the features were very similar. I would say the biggest example were DK's enemies, the Kremlings. Since the Kremlings and the Battletoads were both reptiles, it made sense that they had the same anatomy. To perfectly nail the geometry of Donkey Kong, Rare sent their team of developers to the local Twycross Zoo to study the movements of real gorillas. But unfortunately, a real ape's movement wasn't suitable for the type of platformer they wanted to make, especially if you wanted to speedrun. How many hours of funky monkey ass did they have to look at? Well, I'm sure the apes felt violated after that experience. What made Donkey Kong Country stand out the most out of every Super Nintendo game was its 3D graphics. And that was the main priority for Rare during the development of this game. This wasn't a game that used a Super FX chip like Star Fox or Stunt Race FX. Rare managed to create 3D models and compressed and downscaled them into sprites for the Super Nintendo. While not the first Super Nintendo game with pre-rendered graphics, this took full advantage of what the Super Nintendo could produce. More visually pleasing than any game that utilized the Super FX chip, that's for sure. It was pretty clear that Nintendo and Rare had high hopes for this game, especially in its marketing. The advertising was aggressive and the commercials were really trying to sell you on how the game looked. Looking back at these commercials, you can tell that they were trying to aim at the more older crowd that the Sega Genesis was pushing for. It's worth noting that this game was predated by Donkey Kong for the Game Boy, both releasing in 1994, giving fans a double dose of Donkey Kong. Now if you look at the cover art for Donkey Kong for the Game Boy, this was the first time you would see Donkey Kong wearing his signature tie. Once the new Donkey Kong was born, he would continue wearing this tie from here on out. I wonder if the concept of DK wearing a tie was a Miyamoto idea or a Rare idea. It's possible that both shared some concept art ideas for both games' developments. With the newly designed Donkey Kong, he was given a new sidekick, Diddy Kong. Diddy Kong was originally designed to be an older Donkey Kong Jr., but Nintendo didn't like the radically different design for Jr., and Rare decided to make it a brand new character altogether. Did you know that Wario was considered to be the main villain for this game at one point? In retrospect, I have no idea why he would be interested in stealing a whole herd of bananas. Maybe he was just super hungry. Still, I think stealing coins would be more suited for his character than stealing bananas. Anyway, let's get into the game Donkey Kong Country. That opening Rare intro never gets old. You see Cranky Kong playing the original Donkey Kong arcade theme on his phonograph, when all of a sudden you see Donkey Kong crashing his me time with his boombox. Then Cranky throws a TNT at him. I love this opening so much. I never skip it. The main theme is great and sets the tone for the entire game. If you let the intro play twice, you'll get the scrolling version of the title screen, and it's so beautiful. Before you start the game, you can choose between 1-player, 2-player contest, or 2-player tag team. Contest will have the second player control a different team of DK and Diddy with a different skin, while in tag team, player 1 controls DK and player 2 controls Diddy. You know, given their love for bananas, they look good in yellow. Now because this is a 90s platformer, story is kept in a minimal here. Donkey Kong's huge banana herd has been stolen by King K. Rool, a crocodile with a disturbing red eye. Hey man, you may want to get that checked out. And his reptile crew known as Kremlings, even though some of them are bees, beavers, sharks, and a few others. Donkey Kong's nephew Diddy was put in charge of watching the banana herd. Yeah, he should have thought twice before putting a child in charge of something big. Would you leave a kid in charge of your entire video game collection or comic book collection? I certainly wouldn't. So the Kremlings stuffed him into a barrel like a useless sidekick, and DK set out to get them back. Now as your adventure begins, DK busts out of his home making an impressive entrance for the player and showing off that he means business. Before you go off exploring, you can go back up into your home and mess around in DK's bedroom. I repeat, you actually get to go inside Donkey Kong's house. As a kid, I thought this was awesome. I've never been inside a video game character's home before, as Mario RPG didn't happen until 1996. Yo, DK got a nice crib here. Jump on a tire, roll around, look at the scenery. Nice little area to mess around in. Then you can go in the cave below DK's house to see that your banana herd has been stolen. Now it's on, like Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong Country is a 2D side-scrolling platformer where you go from point A to point B. The game has an overworld map where you go from level to level. Every spot with a Kremling's mugshot is a level, showing that they're taking over your territory. Depending on which Kong you play as, his face will replace the Kremling's, with a cute little victory dance. Along the way you can visit other members of the Kong family. There's Cranky Kong, who just so happens to be the original Donkey Kong from the arcade days. I know over the years Nintendo and Rare have been kind of unsteady when it comes to Donkey Kong continuity, but this Donkey Kong that we're playing as is the grandson of Cranky Kong, the original Donkey Kong, which would also make Donkey Kong Jr. the father of this guy. Cranky Kong is the game's breakout character. Whenever you visit him, he'll give you hints on finding secrets in a level while also reminiscing of the 8-bit days he was in, and take his anger out on you by hitting you with a stick. If you had the SNES manual, he pops up in most pages with snarky remarks. I used to not pay much attention to him as a kid, but as an adult, I appreciate his cynical sense of humor. Truth be told, I think this is a play on the fact that his series has been ignored for so long. Though it is strange that this older version of Donkey Kong has aged into an old man while Mario hasn't. The other member of the family is Funky Kong. As his name implies, he's more of a let loose kind of guy who can give you a ride on his plane between levels and worlds that you've already completed. And finally there's Candy Kong. DK's girlfriend who can save your game and blows you a kiss. Whenever I've gone through so many levels, I'm always relieved to see a Candy Kong save point. Not for the reasons you may think. Now as you're exploring this luscious jungle, take in the scenery and the slowly fading in music. It slowly but surely captures the immersiveness of your environment and surroundings.
Shortly into Jungle Hijinks, you'll encounter a DK barrel where Diddy Kong is located. Just throw the barrel and your nephew joins your adventure. You take control of DK or Diddy. With the press of a button, you can switch between the two Kongs as they give one another a high five, showing off their team dynamic. The animations in this game are very impressive. One of the things I like to do is look at Donkey and Diddy's idle animations. DK pounds his chest while Diddy scratches his head. And when you have a Kong standing over the hedge, they had that "oh shoot, I'm about to fall" animation. How can you not like seeing DK's eyes pop out? There are no health bars in this game. Instead, DK and Diddy can only take one hit each. If a Kong gets hit, he'll run off leaving you with the other Kong to take control of. So if Donkey takes a hit, for example, you're left playing as Diddy Kong until you can find another DK barrel. Finding and breaking DK barrels will spawn the missing Kong, but if you're stuck with only one Kong and that Kong takes a hit, you lose a life. It's definitely a different take on the health bar system, and it's something players want to keep in mind. Donkey Kong controls a bit stiffer than his nephew. As the heavier Kong, however, he can perform a move called the hand slap, where if you duck down and press a button, he will slam the ground or any nearby enemies. This move can be used to reveal hidden items as well. While DK can roll into his enemies, Diddy can cartwheel them. Diddy Kong is the faster of the two. So if you're the type of player that likes to do speed runs, Diddy is probably the better choice. Sadly, he's nowhere near as strong as his uncle, so he won't be able to defeat the more stronger enemies. He can roll into the clumps, but if he attempts to jump on them or crush us, he just bounces off. He's not a recommended choice for levels like Trick Track Trek, where you can use DK to kill the bigger enemies, whereas Diddy would just bounce off and fall. Since there's a lot of enemies in each level, I usually prioritize as Donkey Kong, but I will play as Diddy if I want to beat a level right away. Both Kongs control real well, and the game has some unique physics to them. If you attempt to roll a Kong off of a cliff, you can jump to cancel their fall and come back up to safety, but you have to time it just right and quickly. Your Kong can lift objects to throw at enemies, usually in the form of barrels. One of my favorites is the durable steel keg. After you throw these babies, you can jump on top of them and ride along them as they plow through enemies. I'm sure Donkey Kong's having the time of his life here. And there's the TNT barrels, which are pretty self-explanatory to what they do. Throughout many levels, you'll be finding yourself going through barrel blasting. This is a mechanic that you'll see in many Donkey Kong Country games. It requires precision, patience, and good timing, especially since once in a while you get those with zinger bees blocking the other barrel. And since the barrel blasting mechanic takes place above bottomless pits, you want to be extra careful or else you'll fall. Hidden in each level are small areas where you can collect hidden goodies such as bananas or bonus rooms where you can earn an extra life. These can be found in either bonus barrels or hidden passageways. If you win the mini games that involves the Kongs, you earn an extra life. It is funny to see them lose, especially Diddy Kong in particular. The thing is, if you lose a mini game, you won't be able to retry it unless you either kill yourself or beat the stage, which can be a problem if you're a completionist aiming for 101%. While I don't always do a complete run of Donkey Kong Country, I still think that's rather bogus. The game has a lot of collectibles like bananas, which give you an extra life when collecting 100, banana bunches giving you 10 bananas, and DK balloons, which depending on the color can give you between 1 to 3 extra lives. A more notable way of gaining an extra life are the Kong letters. Throughout every level, there are individual letters that spell the word Kong. You encounter each letter in order, so if you're missing a letter, then you somehow bypassed it. Personally, I don't go out of my way to collect all of the letters in every level, as sometimes they could be put in very tricky spots. Aiding you throughout your adventures are the animal buddies, different animals that you can ride as mounts similar to Yoshi. There's Rambi the rhinoceros, the most common one and my personal favorite. He can attack enemies by ramming into them and break through walls to unlock passageways. My only issue with him is that due to his large weight, he can make platforming a bit tricky, but I always make sure that I'm very careful with Rambi. Another good one is Engar the swordfish, only found underwater. He can kill most aquatic creatures, but you also have to make sure he doesn't get hit easily, as he can be very tricky to catch up to if he swims away. Espresso the ostrich is likely the fastest animal buddy. He can fly a far distance, but is very useless when dealing with enemies. Winky the frog can jump to higher areas, which are very useful for fighting hidden secrets, and he can defeat zingers by hopping on top of them. The problem I have with him though is that his ground speed can be very slippery to control. Due to his traction, there were several moments where I easily slipped off of a platform. And then there's Squawks the Parrot. You can't ride him, and he's only used in one level, Torchlight Trouble. Well geez, what good are you for? You can't be defeated by an enemy? Cool, can you protect me? No, you're useless. There's also a collectible called Animal Tokens which can be found in certain levels. If you find 3 of the same token, you're treated to a bonus area where you can collect as many mini-sized tokens to earn extra lives. More so than the Kong letters, I don't go out of my way to look for these, but if you do, you can earn a bunch of extra lives. Oh, and Squawks is the only one that doesn't have animal tokens, so yeah. Now I can go on and on about the graphics, but Donkey Kong Country is probably the best looking game on the Super Nintendo. I'll try not to sound pedantic, but at the time 3D was not very prominent from when I was growing up. In between this game, my first exposure to 3D graphics was The Mind's Eye, a VHS series of CGI animation scenes, and Toy Story. The first time I've watched either of those was the exact same experience I got from playing Donkey Kong Country. But not only do the graphics look great, the same can be said for the soundtrack. The game was composed by David Wise, who is a musical genius. He really captures the immersion of every level in the game. I think I'll talk more about David Wise once I get to the Donkey Kong Country 2 review. Do yourselves a favor, once you finish this video, go and listen to Donkey Kong Country's soundtrack. You will thank me for this later. While Donkey Kong Country is a short game, there are a variety of different levels. There's your standard jungle levels, which are the easiest in the game. My favorite version is Ropey Rampage due to the rain. Listening to the sound of thunder while it's raining puts me in a very cozy feeling. Aesthetically it looks great. Nice, dark, raining and thunder in the background. I tell you, it's a great feeling when a level makes you feel comfortable. There's the cave levels which also give you a cozy feeling. These are the more slow-paced levels which I could definitely appreciate. There's the aquatic levels, which is everyone's most favorite levels in the game, mostly due to its music. But it's so ambient and peaceful. Then there's players' least favorite levels, the minecart. Usually I don't have a problem with these, but let's just say the recording curse is not a myth. You mostly have to jump from rail to rail, but there are also obstacles coming your way. Mostly abandoned carts left on the tracks and Kremlings coming your way. While the game has its more colorful and cheerful levels, there are also later levels that can be dark and factory-like. The levels have a balance of tone where it could go from light and colorful to dark and moody, and the game does not shy away from being challenging as well. What isn't very challenging to me are the boss battles. You have Very Naughty and Master Necky, who you can take down pretty quickly, Queen Bee, who you just have to throw barrels at, Dumb Drum, who just sends the easiest enemies at you, Really Naughty and Master Necky Sr., recolored bosses that require a bit of patience, and finally the head honcho himself, King K. Rool. Now I love King K. Rool. He's one of my favorite villains in gaming. K. Rool's attacks consist of rolling his crown, shooting cannonballs from above, and hopping around long and short distances. While King K. Rool puts a lot more effort into his fight than, say, Bowser, he's still pretty easy for the most part. And just when you think you defeated the guy and the credits start rolling, the rambunctious Reptilian King recovers and tries to go at you for one more round before being defeated. A for effort, K. Rool, but eat shit. Then you're treated to a hilarious credit scene where you see the full cast of characters. And at one point Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong fighting each other. Cranky congratulates you for beating the game and you get your precious banana herd back. Donkey Kong Country was one of the most graphically impressive games during its time. Admittedly, it has aged in a few areas, but for the most part I think it's aged rather well. If you're curious to try this game, please do. You'll be doing yourself a disservice if you decide to skip it. I'm sure you'll be able to find a Super Nintendo copy of the game, but if you can't, it's also available on the Nintendo Switch Online. For this review, I played both versions as I ran into some issues during my original playthrough. I know it was released on the Game Boy Color, which I'll probably talk about another day, and it was also released on the Game Boy Advance. Either way, give this game a shot.
Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys for the next game in the Donkey Kong universe, Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Conquest. It's Diddy's Conquest, not Diddy Kong's Quest. Yeah.